Welcome to Austin Eras, where we explore Austin's transformation into a 21st century boomtown and the voices shaping its past, present, and future.
Welcome to the Austin Eras podcast. I'm your host, Adam Flagg, and I'm here with an interesting guest today, and I really want to explore a theory that I think should be interesting for any Austinite. What if the rise of Austin as a global hub for music, film, tech, and culture can be traced back to one event? For nearly 4 decades, South by Southwest has been a magnet for musicians chasing their break, founders launching startups, filmmakers premiering their work, and world leaders stepping into Austin stages. From breakout moments like Twitter's launch to appearances by figures like Bruce Springsteen and President Barack Obama, South by Southwest has often felt like the center of the creative and tech universe every single March. And here we are, March again. And here's the question I have. Did South by Southwest transform Austin into the city we know today, or was Austin the only place South by Southwest could have ever worked? Our guest today has had a front row seat to that entire story. Our guest today is Hugh Forrest. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me.
For those that don't know Hugh, he spent more than 3 decades shaping South by Southwest, eventually serving as president and chief programming officer of the globally influential festival. He joined South by in the late 1980s, helped guide the conference programming that transformed the event from a scrappy music festival, truly scrappy, into a global platform for technology, film startups, and cultural conversations. Even in 2012, Hugh and the South by Southwest founders that he was with were named Austinites of the Year by the Austin Chamber of Commerce for the enormous impact the festival had on the city's global reputation. Today, Hugh is launching a new chapter with Gather and Grow Experiences, creating smaller and more intentional gatherings focused on meaningful connections. He's also helping lead conversations through the Austin Forum. So we'll get to all of those things. I'd like to address the opening question. I'd like to talk about this because I feel like I grew up in the Midwest. And my wife and I got married young. And we looked around at a bunch of cities all across the country and said, where do we want to live? We knew that where we were living wasn't going to be where we wanted to be long term. And there's so many things that come out of Austin. It literally in the mid 2000s was this, it's almost like a beacon. Austin was a beacon.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I'm curious. I mean, it's attracted people. I think the city's attracted people for various reasons. But in some ways, is South by Southwest the main reason that Austin's become who it is?
I think from my perspective, South by Southwest is not the main reason, but it's pretty high. It's high up there in a lot of scales. The kind of coincidence, because it was not necessarily intentional this way, that it happens in March when you can argue we have our best weather here. You've got warm days, still coolish nights, and that is a huge contrast to other parts of the nation and other parts of the world where it's still cold. People come here, and for a lot of people, their first taste of Austin was by coming to South by Southwest, or happened when they came to South by Southwest, and they saw this great music, saw some very cool films, met entrepreneurs, innovative startups, that type thing. There were parties, all over the place, free food, free drink, free everything. What's not to like? So again, I think a lot of people, having seen that, then, well, I was kind of on the fence about moving to Austin, but hey, if this is what it's like, then count me in. I think that for people who've lived here for a while, you want to say, well, come back in August or September and see if you feel quite the same way. But Austin's a really cool town in my mind. 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year. It's just even cooler during that week of South by Southwest.
Feels like one of the things we talk about a lot in this podcast is this idea of like capturing the magic of Austin.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's a single event or a single thing that happens in the city that captures the magic better than South by Southwest.
Certainly. I would phrase it, I always phrase it slightly different. It's just, it shines a very bright spotlight on all the creativity that is in this city, all the innovation that's in this city, all the forward-thinking ideas year-round. But again, it's just much more intense during the South by Southwest time frame. And and the shines a bright spotlight also means that is reflective that so much of what makes South by Southwest special is that, again, it emphasizes what is special about Austin. The things that typically have resonated the most out of South by Southwest, starting with music, continuing with film, technology. The event does more food in recent years. These are things that are strengths of Austin, and that's, I think, always been one of the big formulas for success at South by Southwest is shining back, reflecting, emphasizing what makes Austin cool and showing that to the world.
Yeah. I want to go back to the beginning, because I think no conversation can really be complete without going back to the early days of this. So I had a friend, I think, on social media yesterday post a picture, and you've probably seen it a million times, of like the original lineup from 1987 and the different venues and the bands playing. And to think that is what it is today is mind-boggling. But tell me about how you got involved in the organization and how this all kind of happened, because it feels like you kind of fell into it in a way. I've heard you tell the story, and it's really intriguing.
Yeah. Your assessment, Adam, is correct. I did very much fall into it. South by Southwest started in 1987. I came on board shortly before the 1989 event. And my entree into South by Southwest was not because I knew about event planning, which I didn't, not because I had this incredible Rolodex when I was at that point. No, I didn't. It was that I had a computer and they didn't, they being South by Southwest. So I essentially got hired because of that computer, and then I was, well, we'll hire you also. That's such a funny story to say, and even more so when it was a Mac Plus, and Mac Plus is like our smartphones dwarf that now, but that was state of the art back then. And previous to the Mac Plus, the folks who were doing South by Southwest were retaining all their data, which wasn't too significant at that point, but on an old typesetting machine for the Austin Chronicle, because the Chronicle kind of spawned South by Southwest. Wasn't a very efficient way to do that on so many levels, not the least of which is the Chronicle was also using the typesetting machine. So we, when I came on board, we spent 48 hours straight retyping everything from the old database into the Mac Plus, because there was not any kind of, as far as I could tell, any kind of interface that would translate the data. It was an old, for the longtime computer nerds, it was an old database program called Reflex. And it kind of worked. It didn't have its, the whole new system kind of worked. It had some flaws, but from there, I'll do this for a year, and then a year became 5 years, and then 5 years became 10 years, and then 10 years became 30. But it's been a hell of a ride, and as you said, in the early part, gave me a front seat growth to this thing that evolved and transitioned and reinvented itself many times, but again, has always reflected the creativity of Austin.
So you started out as the guy with the computer, and you reinvented yourself as well. I mean, to be able to go through and watch a festival change and continue to change with it is really interesting to me. Did you think that you were building something big in the early years? Or did you just think, hey, this is a great music event, I'm really happy to be associated with it?
Much more the latter than the former.
Yeah.
We were growing, but the growth we experienced then was certainly on a different level than the growth that South by Southwest has seen in the last 10 years or so. The main reason to be involved was, you're bringing all these cool bands to town. It was a lot of fun. people seemed to like it. You got to mix and mingle with rock stars, and that was neat. So that was certainly the initial appeal, as well as it was a more stable paycheck than the various other jobs that I was doing previous to that. So it was all good.
So what year do you think that you went, maybe this is something bigger than just a regional festival that does music? When was that turning point?
I think a lot of different turning points along the way, but certainly one of the first kind of big ones was 1994, which that was the year that Johnny Cash came to South by Southwest. And, we'd had some cool people performing at the event before, but, Johnny Cash is kind of a legend, right?
Yeah.
And he played at Emos. He was reinventing himself, trying to get to a younger audience. He had just done this Rick Rubin produced album where he was doing covers of all these hits out of Seattle. So that was big, and it was so cool that he played on this showcase with a young 18-year-old folk rap singer whose name happened to be Beck. So that's kind of cool. 1994 was also the year that we added in film to the event, and we also added in what was then called multimedia, which seemed like a really cool name for technology, and eventually we changed multimedia to interactive. But that was kind of the first of the pivots, and you kind of see there's some real tapping into the culture and the business stuff here, but again, mind you, in the 90s, it was still a much smaller event than what we see now in Austin.
Interesting. So technology, film, all these things start happening. What did that look like? Was it like a small, like your buddy's gonna have his short film in this festival, or when did it kind of blow up? Did it take a couple years every time these things launched to kind of get bigger?
Definitely, film. I mean, music resonated from first year, 1987. It was bigger that first year than what the organizers anticipated. It continued to grow. Film seemed like it hit, found an audience from day one, and the part of the reason there was two of the four founders of South by Southwest came out of the radio, television, film department at UT. That would be Lewis Black and Nick Barbaro. So they knew their film stuff back and forth. And the funny story there is that the name South by Southwest came from one of their favorite films that when they were studying at UT, which was the Alfred Hitchcock classic North by Northwest.
Is that why? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the morphing. The multimedia side of things, which I started working on when we launched it in 1994, largely because I had that computer back in 1989. I mean, we really struggled to find our kind of place in this March ecosystem, and that was largely before kind of the startup narrative had kind of fully hatched, that you could quit your job and create a startup and become rich. And to me and to so many others, it felt like the multimedia side people were on one side of the room and the music and film folks were on the other. And there's still some of that 30 years later, but they're much more integrated than they were before. Ironically, the multimedia event would not have survived if not for this big music thing that was essentially subsidizing it. I say ironically because that's pretty much flipped in recent years, where the tech supports everything else. But again, in the early days, that was very, very different. Where multimedia, we changed the name to interactive. We saw a little bit of little bit of growth bump in the initial .com boom. Then the bust happened, fell back down again. Then we more by coincidence than by design, we ended up being in the right place at the right time on social media, and had a lot of the early social media pioneers in Austin. This is the 2004, 5, 6, 7 time period. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, this thing that we just, couldn't figure out how to make it grow, and then all of a sudden it just starts taking off because social media was such a revolutionary thing at the time, and it's hard for us to imagine in 2026 that there was a time when people didn't understand what social media was. They went to an event like South by Southwest to kind of wrap their heads around it and wrap their heads around the potential business applications, the new ideas that would come out of this. But that was really what pushed our growth from a interactive standpoint, and really morphed it from being a big music event with this side hustle of technology, big music and film event with this side hustle of technology, to a big tech event with a side hustle of music and film.
Well, let's double down on the social media part. I think Facebook comes out in 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
Although
still at that point, or when it started, it was restricted to, you had to have an EDU in your email.
College students only.
Yeah.
So Twitter becomes something that anyone can do. And you don't even have to have that many thoughts because you're limited to 140 characters, I think.
Yeah.
This happens 2007. Twitter kind of breaks out there. Can you describe what that felt like? And does it feel historic looking back on it? And did it feel historic at the time?
A little bit of the backstory behind Twitter at South by Southwest is that there were essentially 4 co-founders of Twitter also, one of which was a guy named Evan Williams, or goes by Ev Williams. And he went on after Twitter to start Medium, and he's got a relatively new startup now. Ev had been coming to South by Southwest for several years and always had these really cool startups that, wow, that's really cool. And unfortunately, they just didn't have any pickup traction in the mainstream. So when he and his team came to us in may have been January 2007 and said, we've got this new thing, and the new thing was out at that point. It had already been released in the public. We thought, okay, this is cool if they want to showcase this at South by Southwest, and particularly if they, pay us some to showcase this. But I don't think any of us internally quite imagined what was being unleashed, what we were unleashing on the world by that. Now, Twitter, they roughly, I think, doubled their usership from the start to the end of South by Southwest. Now, mind you, again, their usership was pretty small at that point, but it just went, it was crazy. It was the big story coming out of the event. It changed the dynamic of the event such that so many startups wanted to come to South by Southwest to get that same kind of bump that Twitter had. So many VCs wanted to come to South by Southwest to discover the next Twitter before their competition did. And from a just growth standpoint, it just started this proverbial hockey stick for us. Again, you asked how that felt. We were to a degree as much surprised as anyone else in terms of how much this resonated. But I think one of the lessons in retrospect is that unlike a lot of other cool startups that have leveraged South by Southwest to gain traction, Twitter was something that the community could immediately use to see where other people in the community were, what sessions they were going to, what parties they were going to, where they were going to eat, when they were leaving, where they were staying, that type thing. And so that really, really fed the growth mechanism. And traditionally, people would come to South by Southwest, they'd see a band, they'd see a film, they'd experience some kind of new technology, they'd go back to wherever they were, they'd tell their friends about it, and that new thing would get a little bump this way. This was completely different in the sense it was an app, and all they have to do is just email their friends and say, hey, you should sign up for this thing. This is really cool. Now, also, the context here is that Twitter in 2007 was, again, so much smaller and so much different than what it is used for now, but it was still just this kind of game-changing app for South by Southwest, and I think you can argue game-changing in the grand worldview too, in that it kind of really started this push towards shorter content, As you said, it was 140 characters at that point, so it was short bits of information, not necessarily used all that much for news at that point, but just short information. And 20 years later, 19 years later, we see the push towards short fully manifested in something like TikTok or even Reels or Twitter also. But again, that very much came out of South by Southwest. It would have happened somewhere else if it not happened for us. But again, really changed the dynamic of the event in a lot of great ways and a lot of not so great ways.
Maybe
also.
the shorter attention spans were launched with Twitter as well.
Yeah, exactly. Much shorter.
I want to go back to the original question again, and we'll come back to it a few times because I think there's different layers as we kind of talk about the history of South by. But I think, why was Austin the perfect city for South by Southwest? Why couldn't it have been Nashville, Seattle, or even a sleepy capital city in California like Sacramento? Why not those places? Could this festival have happened anywhere else?
Probably could have happened somewhere else, or elements could have happened somewhere else. I think that why it happened in Austin is you had a bunch of folks who thought, well, screw this, we can do this on our own. We can. We know the players, we know these industries, we can invent something. And I think that kind of spirit of entrepreneurism, spirit of scrappy entrepreneurism, a word you used earlier, Adam, really characterizes a lot of the big brands that have come out of Austin, or small brands that eventually became big brands, whether it be Whole Foods or Alamo or something like Yeti, and their dozens of other things like this. Another huge factor of the success of South by Southwest is that it being a university town, that you've got you're pushing out 10 to 15,000 undergrads every year, or graduating, pushing out, who have new ideas on how to change the world, on how to invent new things. And that's always, I think, been a huge part of the creative formula which makes Austin Austin. And the flip side of the UT stuff is that this is how South by Southwest got its home in March, is that while these students are so much of the DNA of Austin, when they left in March for spring break, Austin had this big vacuum, and that's the vacuum that South by Southwest eventually filled. Not because we thought March was the best time to do this event, but it was the only time that the original organizers could get venues to say, sure, have my use my club to do music. I can't do any worse than I'm doing this week because all my audience has gone skiing. All my audience has gone to the coast. There's no one here, and I've tried every different formula for the last decade. Nothing's worked. Go ahead, knock yourself out.
UT's motto, right? They must have kind of adapted it from South by. What starts here changes the world. I mean, in a sense, there's a little bit of both occurring. There's that parallelism between different things in Austin that are growing together at the same time.
Yeah.
Some of the interesting things.
But let me also say, Adam, I mean, could it have started in some of these other cities? Probably. The other thing that Austin had, or the organizers had, myself included, was just kind of this long-term approach. That it's small now. It's that original poster you saw from 1987, which is 20 clubs, 100 bands, and we're going to grow it a little more next year and a little more the year after that, and eventually that incremental growth will get bigger. The challenge of doing starting events now, and even starting events that kind of have been inspired by South by Southwest that have similar focus, is that people don't necessarily have that patience to start small and grow, and that patience really paid off in Austin with South by. But again, there wasn't really a model there, so you weren't like, well, why isn't this as big as blank blank yet? It was just like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, it stood on its own, is what I'm hearing from you. It wasn't really about we have this dream to make it the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, I don't think that was ever. We wanted to be bigger, but it was never this idea that it was going to be this the force of nature that it eventually grew to, or has eventually grown to.
What's that like? I mean, truly, you've been along for the ride for a long time in doing it. What's that like to be in something that you didn't necessarily have the aspiration that it was going to become the biggest thing, but it did anyway? What did that feel like? Did that feel like you won the lottery, or did you feel like you just bought yourself a busy time and a paycheck that was a lot of stress?
Maybe a little more the latter than the former. It's interesting being outside of South by Southwest now and seeing it from afar, because I kind of see it in a different light now that I've left the company. But when you're inside working it, you're kind of most of your energy is trying to keep keep on the saddle and not get bucked off. I think that event organizers probably all share one of the same feelings, this feeling of dopamine when you bring people together and you feel like you've helped to create some kind of community that has some kind of shared vision of community, whether that community is centered around a band that they saw, a film that they saw, a technology that they liked, or whether it's just bringing people together face to face. I mean, that was always what kept me in South by Southwest for so long, as challenging as it was to put the event together for myself and the people on the South by Southwest team and all the many volunteers we had. Again, that feeling when people say, wow, this is the most fun I have all year. I get inspired from coming to this. I got a new job coming to this last year. I met my wife, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, whatnot. That's really cool to have that kind of impact on people's life, and doing it in a city where I grew up, in a city I love, a city that I think has so many cool things in it. That made it even more special to be involved with.
Growing up, I worked as a talent buyer and music promoter and around the concert business. So Austin and South by was definitely a draw. I've had some interesting moments getting to see some film premieres, or just wearing around the music wristband, or having the platinum badge, or seeing Mike Tyson at the South by Interactive. I think one year he's promoting some sort of terrible boxing game.
He was boxing, yeah. That was.
You remember that? Yeah. I waited in line. He had a whole crew of people. So we all have these memories, right? We all do in the city, whether we actually had the badge or not. So I think I've heard you tell the story about Bruce Springsteen. He's coming to Austin next month at Moody Center. Tell us a little bit about what that's like, because you got to have a little fun, right? You weren't just worried about getting bucked off sometimes, and getting to enjoy the time that you had people here.
Certainly one of the most meaningful keynotes in my mind that we've had was 2012, when Bruce Springsteen, the boss, was our keynote speaker. He was releasing the album Magic, and I believe that the release date was the first day or second day of South by Southwest. So his team, we'd been in touch with his team for many, many years trying to get him to speak at South by Southwest. This year, well, this will be great. He'll do a talk, he'll do a show. Great way to get press to launch the new CD. My personal experience here, most of the staff knows that I'm a huge Bruce fan and that I've gone to way too many Bruce shows over the years. And so the staff was telling me, just take an hour off and go to the keynote. And I was, okay, thanks, but I think I'll watch it later or something. And I was really apprehensive that seeing him read a keynote, be kind of wooden on stage would ruin the image of Bruce I have when he's performing, and he's a natural on stage and leading thousands of people in Twist and Shout or something like that. I was totally and completely wrong on that. He delivered this amazing keynote, which I only saw the last 5 minutes of because I didn't want to ruin my impression of Bruce. Well, I've seen the video many times, but I saw the last 5 minutes live. But he was, much like on stage, he was a storyteller. He brought a guitar on. He played some of the chords from one of his songs and gave the inspiration for that. He talked about how much the music industry is changing. This was 2012, so nothing compared to the change now. But he was great, and it was very much a precursor to the autobiography that he released a few years later, and even more so a precursor to the off-Broadway show, where he's just a storyteller. So that was always a great. That's always one of my top memories of South by Southwest. Me and a few other people got to take a photo of him backstage after the keynote. It was fantastic, and we all have that knowledge. Don't meet your idols and things like that. In this case, meeting your idols and hearing your idols stretch their boundaries into some other forum was an endeavor well worthwhile.
Are there any other keystone moments for you over the years that you really enjoyed? Anyone that you got to meet that felt unreal?
Certainly, another huge moment for South by Southwest was 4 years later when President Obama spoke at the event. Mm-hmm. Got to meet him backstage before the event, and then that led to us to South by Southwest doing an event at the White House called South by South Lawn in October 2016. Uh-huh. But that whole, that was kind of like apex South by Southwest. That was, I don't know if we'll ever quite, if the event will ever quite top that. On the one hand, that took many months and many years to put together. On the other hand, once he decided he wanted to do it, and it was the last year of his presidency, and he was kind of like, well, I don't care what people say about me doing things like this. I'm going to do it. It came together remarkably quickly. Mm-hmm. We've seen President Obama speak before and knew that he would be great on stage. He was great on stage. He's got the famous thing, where he stopped at Torchy's Tacos on the way to the Long Center, and so he got there 20 minutes late, but kind of a
you got Torchies.
Yeah, you got to have your Torchies before you go on stage, right?
The question is, did he get the Independent, the Republican, or the Democrat?
I don't know. That's someone's got the receipt somewhere, I think, or got a picture of the receipt, or they have the receipt. But that was neat, and very much goes back to what we talked about before of the kind of power that South by Southwest attained after the launch of Twitter in 2007, where we just became this kind of force of nature for a good decade that world leaders wanted to be there. So many tech innovators, entrepreneurs, CEOs wanted to be there. And was really, really neat to be a part of that and to experience that momentum and to have these things all come together relatively as planned.
Tech leaders, CEOs wanted to be there. That makes me think of that parallel to Austin again, because that's happened in real life in this city, people moving here and companies coming here. So as we come more to the current times with what South by looks like, say the last 5 years, I think it's grown more corporate. It's grown more expensive. It's reflected maybe more of the tech companies that have come to this city, maybe more of the private equity influence, the dollars that just flow. Which is directing which? Is the city's evolution because of what South by is doing, or is it the city evolving and South by is following suit? Any thoughts there?
I think they're going in the same direction, a lot of the same direction, somewhat independently, but again, as you say, it's a fascinating kind of thought exercise to just see those parallels. I think that Austin isn't quite as weird as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, but there's still plenty of cool, quirky, creative, innovative, eccentric things here. You just may have to look a little harder. And I think the same thing with South by Southwest is much more corporate now. Yes, it's there's more kind of tech broism here. Yes, there are more big bands, big films, big companies here. Yes, but there's still a lot of quirky, indie, cool, wow, this one of a kind experience stuff that has always been the DNA of the event. I think that on the flip side of these two things, that if you're some of the things that are more problematic that Austin's growth shares with South by Southwest growth is just that the city, like the event, has changed from an incredibly affordable place to live, which it was 20, 30 years ago and longer when I grew up here and when it was a college town, to a place that it's not as expensive as a lot of other places, but it's certainly not as cheap as it was before. And well, does that matter? Yes, it matters, because the being cheap place to live, affordable rents, is what attracted so many artists, so many creative people, so many innovators, and in fact, so many startups to the city. I was at a benefit a couple of weeks ago, and Graham Reynolds, was talking, and he talked about moving to Austin. He said, "Well, I moved here because it was dirt cheap," and I think his story is reflective of so many people. Again, flash forward to 2026 for Austin and for South by Southwest. There are still some cheaper places to live, but it's harder to find those places. More of the artist community, I think, has been pushed out to the suburbs. Similar with South by Southwest, you can find ways to get in at a lower price, or whether that's doing volunteering or a student, or you're getting a group rate. But again, it's not nearly as cheap as it was before, and that is to a degree made the audience more corporate, because those are the folks who can afford the event. Much more of the badges are now purchased by companies for their employees, as opposed to people just purchasing them on their own. And again, the downside there is that it just is you push out a little bit of that audience, which or that community, word I like much better, that has traditionally made South by Southwest such a festival of creativity in all its many forms.
Yeah, I think the thing I take away from there is that we're not going backwards. That's the hard part. I mean, real estate could be down, and we may have, this may be the biggest seller's market in the country right now, but real estate's still expensive.
Yeah.
Property's expensive, cost of living's expensive, and we're here. And I think being a global tech city has its perks.
Absolutely.
So there's some good things that come from it.
Lots of good things, and I don't want to come off as it was so much better 5 or 10, 15 years ago. It was different, you know, and different sometimes is better, sometimes not better, right?
I'm always curious. I don't think I've asked anyone this question on this show before, but when was Austin the best in your mind?
See, I think the thing there is that Austin is probably always best when you're like, 20 years old, and you've got all the energy in the world to go out to clubs till 2 a.m. and then get back up the next morning and to go explore new things, and you're in love for the first time or the second time, and the world is great. And I think for 20-year-olds who move here now, probably they will say the same thing 10 years from now, that Austin was the best when I moved here. So it's part of what the city is, but it's so much of what you bring internally too.
I think so. I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Hugh Forrest. Be sure to subscribe to Austin Eras on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be right back after the break with the Good Hang segment and talking about the future of Austin events.
In every episode of Austin Eras, we uncover the city's history, vibrant present, and bold future. Just like Austin, your financial journey is a story worth crafting. At Collective Advisors, led by Adam Flagg, Managing Partner, Senior Wealth Advisor, and Certified Financial Planner Professional, your story is in skilled hands. From investments to retirement planning, Adam and his team bring together a collective of dependable professionals to help you build, maintain, and enjoy financial security. Start your financial legacy today at collectiveadvisors.com or call 512-467-1923. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Welcome back to Austin Eras. I'm your host, Adam Flagg, and our guest today is Hugh Forrest. We are going to talk about the future. But before we do that, we're going to go to our Good Hang segment. So this is where we can have a little fun. I don't think you've heard too many of these questions in advance, so just rapid fire. Tell me what your best answers are for someone that's been here and helped shape South by, I think people will be listening. They'll want to know. They want to hear what your culture, your programming guys. So I think what's a weird or quirky Austrian tradition you hope never fades?
Eeyores.
Eeyores. Okay. All right. I've still never gone.
Oh, come on, man.
No.
Never gone?
No, I've never gone. No.
You may be outside of the age demographic now, but it's still kind of talking weird and quirky Eeyores.
Okay. If you could have dinner with any Austinite, living or dead, who would it be and why?
I think a great one to have dinner would be Darryl Royal, the old football coach. I'm a big UT football fan, but even beyond that, much of the lore, at least, of how this city kind of morphed in the early 70s was when Darryl Royal began listening to Willie Nelson, began hanging out with Willie Nelson, and that kind of united the rednecks who watched football with the hippies who were listening to Willie and the other progressive country folks coming out of Austin. I'm sure there's probably more legend than truth in that, but I think it'd be interesting or fascinating, intriguing to hear his perspectives on that and get some tips on who that next figure can be that can unite some of the different factions in the city.
I like that. Okay. If a friend was visiting Austin for 36 hours, where are you taking them? Where are you going?
I think you want to hit some of the older Austin institutions that are still unique to this city, whether that be, Hole in the Wall, Texas Chili Parlor, El Arroyo, go to Mount Bunnell, don't leave your valuables in your car. Right.
There's always someone lurking there.
Yeah. Walk the hike and bike trail. If they're here on a weekend, go to Little Texas and play chicken shit bingo. Yeah. Things like that are still completely unique to Austin and still continue to give the city so much of its charm and character and personality.
So you mentioned Willie, you've mentioned Bruce. In terms of musicians, what's an album or artist that instantly reminds you of Austin? Is there something local or special to you?
I hate this answer, and I don't hate this answer, but Christopher Cross.
Okay.
I was in high school when that first album came out, and I remember going to the show at the old Austin Opera House, 200 Academy, and it seemed like the greatest thing ever. And he was this. He came out of the Austin scene. I now spend far too much time on Sirius Radio listening to yacht rock radio. he's like the poster boy for yacht rock. But Christopher Cross always reminds me of Austin, probably even more so than Willie Nelson.
Don't tell Steely Dan that they're yacht rock. I've heard that over and over again. Yeah. So certain
they've left
people
this plane so that we can hold that secret from them.
Who's a leader in Austin right now that you really admire?
Oh, wow. I think some of the entrepreneurs who are doing really unique and interesting things. I try to stay away from the word interesting because I don't think interesting is interesting. But someone like the folks who did Icon,
3D printing,
3D
homes.
printing, and similarly, and particularly in recent months, the Aptronic folks who are doing so much cool stuff with robots, and then back to where we were a few minutes ago about someone like Graham Reynolds, the people who are in the music scene, still doing completely innovative and cool stuff there. So a lot of really cool folks.
You did like a Don Quixote rock opera, I think, like maybe 5 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah. So very creative for sure, a true artist. Okay, let's talk a little South by Southwest. What's the wildest thing you've ever seen happen during South by?
There's so much wild, and most of it I've forgot. One of the wilder stories was I got the guy who did comedy writer Chuck Lorre
Okay.
came to Austin. And I usually just try to stay away from the celebs because it's already complicated enough, and they don't necessarily need to meet me. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I went to see him backstage before he before he went on stage. And amongst the folks backstage was the artist, musician Amanda Palmer, who's pretty out there, but in a good way. And then who should walk in to the backstage area but this guy who's about as tall as I am. He's got a baseball cap on, and he's the star of Two Men and a Baby, right?
2.5 Men?
Yeah.
Charlie Sheen?
No, not after Charlie Sheen. Come on.
Ashton Kutcher?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ashton Kutcher comes in. He's wearing a baseball cap and starts talking to Amanda Palmer, and I'm literally kind of like the fly on the wall here. And Amanda Palmer has no idea what he does. And so he's describing what he does. And he says, "Oh, I'm this actor on this small TV show that's really stupid about how to,
So he described it as stupid.
It's described it as stupid and totally self-effacing.
Yeah.
You would have thought that he was this, small town, whatever, extra or something. But they had this beautiful kind of conversation where she talked about her art and he talked about his art. And so that's one of the just weird, cool intersections of creative people that I think typifies an event like South by Southwest.
If South by Southwest launched for the first time today in 2026, do you think it would succeed?
Probably not. I think that the world is so much different on so many levels in 2026 versus 1987. And one of those most important differences or levels is that everything you do, everything that's done is broadcast, right?
Yeah.
In one form or another. And one of the beauties, if you will, of South by Southwest in 1987 is we could make a lot of mistakes and did make a lot of mistakes that were relatively, contained. And making those same kind of mistakes now would not be contained and would be really hard to recover from.
We're about to head into South by Southwest. So for people that are listening right when this comes out, they may, hear this and be prepped, or someone may be visiting the city. So what's the most underrated Austin spot visitors should discover during South by? Or are there any tips or tricks that you'd give them if they're coming in for the show, for the festival?
I mean, I've always, my counsel was always spend some time studying the schedule. But I'm fully aware that most of us don't have time to spend for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. What is neat is there have been lots of third-party apps developed in the last month that use the power of AI to filter the schedules. So I would encourage you to check those out. You can see a lot of them on the South by Southwest page on Reddit. That just helps you find the stuff that you want to find much easier. And I mean, it's neat to go to South by Southwest and bump into someone that you never thought you'd bump into and strike up a conversation with Ashton Kutcher and yada, yada, yada. But that still doesn't happen quite as frequently as you might think. So it's always good to have a plan and then veer from that plan. In terms of things to do in Austin, let's hope there's great weather for South by Southwest, because the event is always that much better when there's great spring weather in Austin. But certainly take some time to, again, hike and bike trail, walk on South Congress, walk around the city, absorb the sunshine, absorb the spring. I mean, going back to some of the things we talked about before, the secret sauce, or one of the many secret sauces of South by Southwest, is always just that people love coming to Austin. There are great restaurants to go to. There's There's, again, some great walks you can do around town. There's cool stores you can go to. People are generally friendly. Experience all that. As much great content as there is at South by Southwest, you should experience the city in all its many forms also.
Excellent. And I think people are going to be walking around a little bit more anyway, because there's a giant crater where the convention center was.
Giant crater perhaps doesn't fully sell what that cavity is, yes. No convention center means there's going to be more walking, but walking always leads to impactful and interesting collisions and new ideas that way.
I'd like to move to the next section, which is about the future. I think there's some really exciting things that are going on both in your life and in the city. But I'll start with something that I've heard you say, which is Austin still has a spirit where almost anyone will take your call. Why has that culture always been important to the city?
I think that culture, again, reflects the general friendliness here. It also reflects the spirit of cooperation much more than competition. This idea that a rising tide lifts all boats, that in a sense we are all in this together. And I don't know that every community has quite that same spirit of cooperation, and that's really neat. And yeah, I love that quote, that idea that almost anyone, if not everyone, will take your call here and have a meeting with you. And again, that speaks to the spirit of creativity, the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of innovation that has really made this place so special on so many levels.
Agreed. Now, you were at South by for almost 3 decades, and we've been talking a lot about it, but the fact is you're no longer there. So I want to talk about the future. I want to talk about your new company, Gather and Grow Experiences, and what you're all about. What's the vision behind Gather and Grow?
The basic idea here is that Gather and Grow provides consulting, big picture and specific, for organizations and people who want to build community-focused events. And even more so, the thesis is that community, IRL, face-to-face, bringing people together, is so much of what makes us human. It's so important now in a world that is so virtual, and will become even more so as AI continues to manifest into every aspect of our lives. I think, and I'm certainly not the first person to say this, but that we generally interact with each other in more positive ways, face-to-face, IRL, than we do when we retreat into social media. And so the more we can encourage those kinds of, build, foster those kinds of face-to-face interactions, I think the better we are, the more functional we are as a society, as a species.
Agreed. We actually, Mel Martin, our showrunner and producer, and I just went to a conference in Austin at the Hilton Austin a week and a half ago, and
that was the
New Media Summit.
Yeah, I saw.
Yes, you saw that? Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the speakers, Sam Parr, who started Hampton, and he started a few other companies, saw a hat. So another person we ended up meeting said IRL greater than URL, and I think that kind of mentality, like what you're saying, totally aligns. After going to that conference, I felt there was a lot of talk about AI, for sure, about where things are going with media, but there's still something really special. So tell me a little bit more about the projects that you're working on at Gather and Grow, and what the type of clients or the type of business that you're doing.
At present, we've got 5 clients, 2 of which here in Austin. One, the Austin Forum, which has been around for ages, but is trying to grow a little bit more aggressive in terms of the frequency of events. Austin Forum, for those not familiar with it, was initially a monthly lecture series, and now trying to kind of move to a weekly lecture series that covers a lot of different kinds of things in the technology world. One of the things I love about the Austin Forum is that all the events are free and open to the public, so you don't in any way restrict accessibility. That's really cool. I'm also working with the Texas Tribune Festival, which is the event that happens in the fall in Austin, helping them with programming. That's really exciting. Working with an event in El Paso called Borderlands, which focuses on two small things, i.e. the intersection of AI and immigration policy, two things that are kind of in the news, and also helping with an event in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which will occur in August 2026 called SP2B. That stands for Sao Paulo Beyond Business. And also we're working on an event in Limerick, Ireland called Futura Innovation Conference, and then a few other things that we'll probably get involved with also. But again, the kind of common thread on all these is trying to educate the teams that are working on these how not to make the same mistakes we made at South by Southwest. What are the best things we learned about bringing people together, about facilitating, building long-lasting communities, and so that's really neat and really exciting.
How do you? I'll double down on this a little bit. How do you get people to interact more when you go to these conferences and half the people are on their phone or their computer answering emails? Other people walk from their hotel room to the actual event, and then they walk right back. How do you encourage that communication and that kind of interaction?
It's difficult, and I say that as an introvert who's the person on their phone and on their computer, probably not interacting as much as I should. But I think increasingly the future of conferences, of events, of get-togethers is about networking as opposed to newsmaking. Newsmaking being the speaker on stage that reveals that Acme Web Company just released version 4.0, and networking is, again, creating events that are less top-down, are more bottom-up, where people are radically encouraged to network with each other, connect with each other, talk with each other, learn from each other, again, make connections that can help take their career, whatever they're doing, to the next level. And I think with almost any event, you can get great content from listening to speakers, but even more of the value is the attendees that you interact with before or after sessions, at networking events, in the hallways, when you're waiting in line for coffee or beer, that type thing. At South by Southwest, at all these other events, small connections can lead to big, big things.
I want to come back to something local that people in Austin can participate in, the Austin Forum. You mentioned a little bit about it. I personally have heard about it, but I never really experienced it. So what does, is it every week? Is it at the same location? Is it a different speaker? How does it work?
These days, a lot of the content occurs at the Rio Grande campus of Austin Community College, which used to be Austin High, which was my alma mater, so there's something there. We also have online book discussion events. So I did a discussion a few weeks ago about the relatively new Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson book, Abundance. I'll do a discussion in mid-March about the new Cory Doctorow book, Enshittification. Those online events, obviously anyone around the world can participate in those. The events are, again, free to go to. There's networking beforehand, and there's networking afterwards at a bar called Remedy, which is downtown. Again, really like the accessibility that it brings together all different kinds of people, not simply people who can afford a ticket price. And I really like the intentional structure of networking before and after. So it's a really neat thing to be involved with. Also, similar to South by Southwest, it covers all kinds of different things which fall under this kind of loose umbrella of technology. The session that I was part of last week was about future of cancer and how AI is impacting the cancer world. Before that, we had a session, or 2 weeks before that, we had a session on IoT. April brings what we call AI April, so all kinds of content about AI. and all kinds of other kinds of technologies that are relevant to everyone in society.
I'm going to close with one last question. Someone that shaped some of the programming and helped shape Austin in some ways with South by Southwest. What do you hope Austin looks like in 20 years? What do you hope the identity of the city looks like? Where has it changed? Where did we get better? Where are we struggling?
That's a great question. I back to where we were a few minutes ago. I hope that we retain that spirit of cooperation and cooperation over competition, that ability to call anyone, to network with anyone. I hope that we figure out some new strategies to create more affordable living here, so that in addition to high-paying tech jobs, we have places where artists, creatives who maybe don't have high-paying jobs can live. I hope that we, in 20 years, and maybe 20 years is not long enough, we figure out some mass transportation options, i.e. light rail. I hope that we, or I trust that in 20 years we'll have gone through several more airport expansions, and we'll have more options for direct travel outside the city. But most of all, I hope that we retain the Keep Austin Weird vibe, and I don't know that Keep Austin Weird completely applies to where we are now, but I always love how Mayor Watson in his previous term phrased this, which is Keep Austin Weird really means keep Austin creative. And so keep new ideas coming in, keep experimenting with new things, keep meeting new people, keep cross-pollinating. If we do that, then this city remains a place that young people want to come to, old people want to come to, people want to come to visit, people want to come to stay, people want to bring their startup to, their band to, their film to, and that would be great.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Adam. This has been a lot of fun.
From reflecting back on the Mac Plus with Reflex to seeing Twitter in 2007 jump in popularity, to watching your own evolution, I think our listeners will really enjoy this podcast, and I appreciate the hope that you have for the future of Austin. So thanks
Wonderful.
again for joining Austin Eras.
Thank you, Adam.
Austin Eras, featuring Adam Flagg, is brought to you by Collective Advisors. Collective Advisors offers investment advisory services through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Guests on Austin Eras are not affiliates of CWM LLC, and opinions expressed by guests may not reflect those of CWM LLC. This show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes and is not intended to provide specific legal, tax, or other professional advice. For a comprehensive review of your personal situation, always consult with a qualified professional.